All right, so tonight we're going to be studying about persecution, a little bit of a grim topic, but I've been thinking about it a little bit more lately. Actually, last Sabbath, I read about a couple of stories of folks who, in the first century and second centuries, gave their lives to God through, martyrdom. And, I think when you think about persecution, it's the question sometimes arises, why? Why would a good God, a loving God, allow persecution? And I guess it's a very close cousin to why does God allow evil, which definitely is not in the scope of our study tonight. But nevertheless, there are really good reasons why God allows persecution, especially to his people in the last days. And I want to explore six reasons why that I found through my study as to why persecution occurs and what we can learn from it. So let's begin. The first reason that I've uncovered is that rejectors of God's love despise manifestations of that love. Rejectors of God's love despise manifestations of that love. We see this clearly throughout the Bible. You'll remember the story of Cain, right? Right out the gate. Why did Cain have so much anger and animosity towards Abel? Well, it's because Abel had an undying love for God, and that love for him was too much for Cain to bear. So there's something within the carnal mind or the worldly life that really can't stand that sacrificial love and devotion that the God-fearing person exhibits. 1 John chapter 3, verse 12 and 13 says, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother, and wherefore slew he him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. Marvel not, my brethren, if the world hate you. So the one of the, I guess, the true indicators of a Christian living in accordance to God's love and law is the amount of, I guess, animosity that is naturally drawn to him or her. If you remember the Beatitudes, it's kind of like if you read the Beatitudes, it's like this ladder to heaven, right? It's like this journey to heaven, starting with blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then it ends, kind of book ends with blessed are those who are persecuted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You kind of get the sense that no matter where you are on this journey, as long as you're tracking towards it, God is with you, of course, and you're moving along. But at towards that end, kind of like the culmination, the closure of that Christian journey, there should be expected some level of persecution. And it's nothing really that we're never supposed to provoke persecution. Ellen White actually mentions that in her writings, that we're never really to hasten the time of persecution. We actually should pray that it should be thwarted as much as possible. But regardless, as we live naturally aligned with the Lord, it will draw hatred for those who have rejected that love. John chapter 15, verse 19 says, if you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. You also kind of see increasingly in the world today that we live in, and pretty relevant, I guess, to the time we live in as elections draw near. There's this really distinct polarization, kind of like at all costs, support the candidate no matter what. And if you're not supporting the candidate, and if you're not a part of that political party, then you really can't reason with or love or engage with the other side. It's like one side is totally in the right and the other side is totally in the wrong. And even if the side that you're on is not totally in the right, you definitely can't be part of the other group of people because they're definitely, almost close to being demon possessed or something. So that really distinct and strong polarization that's taking place in the world, really carries over in the spiritual realm as well. And in the last days, we know the world is going to be completely polarized, where there's going to be this great unification of the confederacy of evil coming together, all aimed at one particular group of people. Why? Because they keep the Sabbath, because they won't go along with their ways. But human behavior is as such is that when people feel really strongly about something and the other person opposes it, depending on the character, that can be the simple cause for rifts and destroyed relationships and perceptions in people's minds. And that is going to be magnified, millions of times over as we continue to approach in these last days. Amos 5:10 says, "They hate him who reproves in the gate, and they abhor him who speaks the truth." Again, people don't want to be seen as wrong. In fact, we live in a culture that's very postmodern, and I think some philosophers are saying, well, it's kind of like beyond postmodernism at this point. I don't know if they know what to call it, where, it's very much expected that everyone has their own truths and that they kind of live according to their own reality. And that's supposed to be encouraged. And to a certain degree, there's a lot to respect in a society where they allow these differing opinions to, coexist, so to speak. But from a spiritual perspective, that perspective is actually fairly dangerous, right? But when you come and you start to press a certain moral position, and if it's at cross with another person's, they start to feel threatened and uncomfortable and uneasy, especially in the culture that we live in today. So again, that will be magnified millions of times over, especially when there's a cloak of religion that's driving that. And that brings me to my next point, that false religion substitutes righteousness for strict morality and looks for scapegoats. False religion substitutes righteousness for strict morality and looks for scapegoats. So I think we don't have to look too far in history to see religion being used, and thinking that great things are being accomplished in God's name when actually great evils are taking place. You can look back to the history of this country itself and kind of how it conquered and decimated native lands, right? A lot of times with the on thought that, oh, we're coming here in God's name, or oh, these folks are quote unquote, savages or barbarians, and we're taming them through our gospel, quote unquote, or so to speak. There's a reason why the U.S. is seen as the beast in prophecy of the land, because and that it speaks as a dragon, because there's almost this like bipolar nature right within our country's history, where there's kind of like this aspiration to certain righteous principles, but in practice, a lot of evil has taken place, a lot of it in the name of God. You can also the history of slavery, how, in antebellum South, how they used religion and how they used God's name to justify horrible, horrible acts towards African Americans during that time. So you can easily see, I mean, there's just so many examples within history of people using God's name to not only justify certain things that they're doing, but also to make it seem like what they're doing is holy. It's this really dystopian phenomenon that takes place. But we also don't have to look too far, because that also happens in our lives, albeit maybe not as drastic, maybe not as grotesque, but we also at times use God's name to justify certain things that we do that may not be relationally healthy. So now you kind of fast forward when you have a whole nation and whole world deceived into thinking that they're doing what is right, then you have really a situation that is ripe for disaster from the very beginning. And again, you're starting to see, especially with Christian nationalism and the evangelical right in the US and in other different countries, and all the different types of religions with a nationalist flair. Again, they really, with intention, and at times good or positive intention, or what they think may be, they really proceed and press forward with agendas, with thinking that it's of God. when in the reality it's breaking a lot of principles that God has put in place, especially free will, etc. So, John 16, verse 2 says, they will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he's offering service to God. That's exactly what happened to Jesus, right? You had the Pharisees who were very much of religionists, right? From to the greatest extent possible, right? Kind of stuck in their moralistic ways and kind of so held to the letter of the law that it had totally clouded their view, and to the point where their ambitions and their practice of keeping the law caused them to want to kill the lawgiver. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. But if it happened to the Pharisees, it can happen to any of us, and it certainly will happen to a lot of folks all around the world as they come together and continue to persecute. So yes, we need to really be careful. In Great Controversy 592, it says, those who honor the Bible Sabbath will be denounced as enemies of law and order, as breaking down the moral restraints of society, causing anarchy, corruption, and calling down the judgments of God upon the earth. Their conscientious scruples will be pronounced obstinacy, stubbornness, and contempt of authority. They will be accused of disaffection toward the government. And again, these folks who are accusing God's people at this point in time will be deceived, right, by evil angels, will be deceived by Satan himself, all under the banner and cloak of false religion. The next thing I want to highlight here is that hatred puts a spotlight on people and issues. And you also see that around the world too. Take a look at the headlines on the news, and you kind of, from a global perspective, a lot of things that make the news have to do with some sort of hatred that's taking place from either one nation to another, or one person to another, or one candidate to another. This kind of passion and anger and hatred has a sense of drawing interest. And that's also what happens, I guess, psychologically and sociologically from a persecution standpoint. When there is a group that's either marginalized, not treated right, or persecuted, it tends to make headlines, and it also tends to grab the attention of other people. One, because people can't fathom, how in the world could someone treat another person like that, or how in the world could another nation treat a people group like this, or how in the world could such evil be taken on such a national scale? That draws upon the heart's emotions, it draws upon the mind's inquiry. And so hatred absolutely puts a spotlight on people and issues, and the same holds true for persecution as well. And Paul understood this, right? Philippians chapter 1, verse 12 through 14 says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it's become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. So, you kind of think, right? Uh, Paul, who poses really no threat to national security or the nation, is truly an innocent man here. But the man is being put in jail left and right. He's getting stoned, shipwrecked. He's just going through all of these different trials and tribulations, and a lot of it has to do with being persecuted. And it causes people to marvel, like, why in the world are people so much attacking Paul, and why is there so much emphasis in shutting him up? Why are they trying to silence him? What is he saying that is causing consternation? And we see this in the stories of Jesus as well, right? Where, the hatred from Pharisees caused a sense of inquiry among the believers, a sense of shock that Jesus would defy certain rulers and certain rulings because it wasn't part of God's plan or God's commandments. So Paul is saying that, look, whatever was meant to evil for me, God has used it for good. And the stuff that God's doing through me in my trial is actually advancing the gospel because people are hearing about it and it's actually inspiring them. It put a spotlight on Paul, and the Holy Spirit, of course, leverages that to win more souls to him. Luke chapter 21, verse 13 through 15 says, "This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle it, therefore, in your minds not to meditate beforehand how to answer, for I will give you a mouth of wisdom which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict." So you also get a sense that there is an interest of how we will respond to situations when people are against us or the spotlight is on us. People will be genuinely curious why we are going against the tide. Why are we making a stance the way that we're making? What is our reasoning? What could cause us to want to or be okay with losing our jobs because we want to keep the Sabbath, or you know losing out on a promotion because you're not getting buddy buddies with someone who is unethical, right? What causes that determination to live righteously in the midst of so much pressure and losing out on earthly benefit? So it is our opportunity during persecution to further accelerate the gospel through our example. The next thing that I want to show is that negative perceptions and situations are an opportunity for solidifying stances. So negative perceptions and situations are an opportunity for solidifying stances. When there is pressure thrown at us, there there is a reaction. When I am questioned and I'm put on the spot for why do I believe what I believe, or when I'm trying to talk to somebody about the gospel and then they come back at me with a legitimate question or an assertion or an accusation, it puts that kind of small little pressure kind of spurs me to action and makes me think, well, where do I stand, or where how can I show this person the love of Jesus in the midst of this question? Or what can I take from this so I can be a better person? When someone tells me that I have a character flaw, and encourages me to do better, then that pressure I can use to my advantage, and to be a better person and to be a better follower of Jesus. When persecution takes place, it really has a purifying effect. In fact, it provides us perhaps the greatest opportunity to showcase where we stand and to take that stand ourselves. It when the whole world is against you, or when organizations or people are against you, you have a choice to make, whether you're going to continue to take that stand for principle, even though people are making fun of you or not with you, or if you're going to fold and just align with the pressures that are coming at you. It's a true cause for decision. It's a true remover of um, lukewarmness in a sense, right? Because you can't really have one foot here, one foot there. No, you're forced to make a decision. Romans chapter 5, verse 3 through 5 says, "Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." So Paul is taking the stance that we should rejoice in our sufferings because those very same sufferings produce endurance, ultimately producing character, strengthens our hope, and strengthens our love for God. Psalm 119:71 says, "It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes." So not only does that pressure, whether it's through trial or whether it's through persecution, help us to solidify our stance. It helps us to meditate upon and explore where we should be standing. And that in a sense is extremely helpful. Now, there's as we kind of get closer to and closer to the end of time and we think about what's before us, it's heaven, it's eternal salvation, then yeah, we really want to make sure that we do take that stand. And if God needs to allow persecution to get us over a certain hump, or to help us. Maybe we've been very nominal, or we've been very you know hesitant to make that stance. Sometimes God will have to bring a trial before us to really pressure and push us for our own benefit. I like what Ellen White says. She says, when the storm of persecution really breaks upon us, the true sheep will hear the true shepherd's voice. Self-denying efforts will be put forth to save the lost, and many who have strayed from the fold will come back to follow the great shepherd. The people of God will draw together and present to the enemy a united front. In view of the common peril, strife for supremacy will cease. There will be no disputing as to who shall be accounted greatest. So, from God's perspective, and kind of from, I guess, a return on investment in the sense of energies that could be put forth in maximizing efficiency or effectiveness. Pardon me, I'm a consultant. The whole persecution thing, although God never wants to see anyone suffer, and it's never his plan for anyone to die, um, you know, kind of weighing the greatest importance and how I can get the greatest effect of spiritual growth and solidification in my people, he absolutely will allow that. And what she's saying here is that when persecution comes, it spurs us, right? Not only to take a stance, but to live out our best Christian lives through the Holy Spirit. We embrace self-denial. We say, okay, I'm going to stop being selfish, and I'm going to start seeking and saving the lost. I'm going to tell as many people as I can about Jesus, because they need to hear him. Time is short. Um, People who may have gone away from God, they come back to him. The things that would have caused wedges between us in the church, and that happens a lot, all that goes out the window, because all of a sudden you now have an external force that's threatening the peace and spiritual prosperity and um, unitedness of your people, of the church. And so you stop worrying about what other people are wearing or saying or doing, and you start thinking, well, how can I, unite with them, and to, in this spiritual warfare, and through the love of Christ, how can we work together here, to defeat this, or to overcome this? And, that also translates for the strife for supremacy. That also translates to disputing and gossiping and all the other small little things that we kind of look over in church, but are still really bad and evil. That persecution, it kind of purifies and stomps all of that out. Uh, Jean Edward Veith also said something that I thought was very poignant. He said, one of the greatest paradoxes in Christian history is that the church is most pure in times of cultural hostility. When things are easy and good, that is when the church most often goes astray. When Christianity seems identical with the culture, and even when the church seems to be enjoying its greatest earthly success, then it is weakest. Conversely, when the church encounters hardship, persecution, and suffering, then it is closest to its crucified Lord. Then there are fewer hypocrites and nominal believers among its members. And then the faith of Christians burns most intensely. And that's, I think, what we all want. We want our faith to burn most intensely. Now, we don't absolutely need persecution for our hearts to burn intensely. If you give your heart to Jesus right now and you accept him, he will cause that heart to burn intensely. There is something, however, when we do go through trial and persecution, where in the midst of darkness, in the midst of so much deep pain and evil around us, we get a truer appreciation of God's love and God's power through and through, and it allows us to be even brighter Christians than we've ever been. Uh, One of the last things I want to mention is that the greater the trial, the greater opportunity to demonstrate our love. So we've talked about a lot of things tonight. Um, Love, right, is the principal thing. And I thought about this. It's like, will I love Jesus if he doesn't save me from a certain situation, even death? Will I love him still, if I'm persecuted and I'm tortured, and I have to go through the worst ordeal that I could ever think of? Will I love him still? And when I think about true love. It's like when everything is stripped away, when all blessings seem to cease, when things aren't going my way at all, will I still love him? And to me, I think that's the greatest test, where I'm not loving him anymore because of the blessings I receive, because I may not really have much, or I may not have anything, but I'm loving him because of who he is. I'm loving him because of the relationship that I have. Matthew 11:19 says, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, Behold, a man gluttonous and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners, but wisdom is justified of her children. Job 13:15 is probably one of my favorite verses. It says, Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. And when we talk about the story of Job, Satan is persecuting him and trying his level best to break him, to cause him to curse God. Satan comes with these accusations to God and says, You're not fair because you're allowing Job to have all these blessings. He's rich, he's a billionaire, he has a great family. He just loves you because of all the things that he has. He loves you because of the health he enjoys. That's why he loves you. You take those things away, he'll stop loving you. Persecution allows us and trials allow us to shift our focus from the blessings to the blessing giver. It allows us to love God for who he is, not because of what he's given us. Yes, we are to enjoy and appreciate and praise him when he gives us a lot. But the greater thing is to make sure that you love him because of who he is. Prophets and Kings says, Satan says, for fear of wanting food and clothing, they will join with the world in transgressing God's law. The earth will be wholly under my dominion. So Satan says, if I can take away from God's people the very basics, the very things that they need to live, then they will, this is his next shot, right? To prove to God that, you really don't have a people that love you. You only have a people that are clinging to you because of what you give them. When persecution happens, and especially the last day persecution, when literally everything is stripped away, and everything is gone from us, we're in the mountains, or we're running away as much as we can, we literally will have no one. We will have each other as brothers and sisters, but as we're dispersed, many of us will be alone. Some of us will be imprisoned. Some of us will be starving and being, on our deathbeds. In those moments, will we love God still? And that's our opportunity to show to the whole universe, yes, we love him, not because of what he's given us, but because of who he is. And that's something that we should strive to do every single day that we live. The very last slide that I have for us tonight is the last reason that I can think of for why persecution is allowed. And that is Satan's case is still open. End time persecution helps seal it. So the message says, for a time, the oppressors will be permitted to triumph over those who know God's holy commandments. To the last, God permits Satan to reveal his character as a liar, an accuser, and a murderer. Thus, the final triumph of his people is made more marked, more glorious, more full, and complete. So obviously, there's still more that God is allowing or will allow Satan to demonstrate to make a point. There's a lot to discuss here and there's a lot to pulse here, but one of the things in God's wisdom and his love and his mercy and his determination for folks to love him because they choose to love him, not because of fear, is, making the choice to have Satan demonstrate to the world who he is. And he's been doing that for 6,000 years. Obviously, he did that the most at the cross, which was aimed at Jesus. In the last days, it's aimed at his people and it's aimed at a corporate group of people. And this is an opportunity for the whole universe to see that if Satan were to be given dominion of the world, if he were to be given kingship of the universe, how he would rule it, and the sheer evil that he's going to be bringing upon God's people, whether through lies or accusations or murders or mistreatments of the worst kind. All of this is going to be on full display at its greatest because he's going to put his full fury as his time will be to an end, to try to win over this world and to try to be the ruler of it. Obviously, he's going to fail miserably and he'll be defeated. But in his last act, oh, his second to last act, right? Because after the millennium, he comes back with his last act. But in that moment, in that very last day of this Earth's history, he's going to make the most valiant effort that he can to try to win. And as he does that, he's going to make the greatest demonstration that he could ever make of who he truly is, and everyone will see it, and his case then will be obviously very much closed. And of course, Jesus will come, and we'll never have to face persecution. We'll never have to face evil ever again. So as I close, I just want to say that I'm not proposing that we need to be persecuted to be holy. I'm not proposing that we need to be persecuted to have the heart of Jesus in these last days. But what I am saying is that persecution, unfortunately, will come. It must come. And hopefully, through these reasons, we understand a little bit more of the wisdom of God allowing it, and that we always see God as a God of love, and it furthers our love for Him. Thank you.